Nancy is a psychotherapist, author, public speaker, mindfulness teacher, and interfaith minister. A longtime student of Eastern spirituality, mindfulness practices form the ground of her work. She is the author of the upcoming book, The Emotionally Exhausted Woman, and several more, including How to Get What You Need and Can't Stop Thinking. Nancy is sought after speaker on well-being mindfulness and has been featured on Good Morning America, the New York Times, and countless other media. She is also a regular blogger for Psychology Today and the Huffington Post. In addition, Nancy spent 25 years as a top-ranked equestrian on the National Horse Show circuit and serves as a performance consultant to professional athletes and artists. Good morning, Nancy. How's it going?
Good morning. So glad to be here. And thank you for that lovely introduction.
You're very welcome.
And I want to, first of all, welcome all of you. I wish I could see your faces, but I understand with technology that's not possible. And I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here because it suggests to me, I'm not glad you're here because you're signed up for an emotionally exhausted workshop. That's not necessarily a good thing, but I'm glad that you're here and taking it seriously, taking your perhaps exhaustion, taking perhaps your own depletion, taking your well-being seriously, which your being here suggests to me that you are. So I'm really happy about that. And hopefully I can offer you some tools to feel replenished, to feel stronger, to feel less depleted in your life. And of course, even though I can't see your faces, you can communicate with emojis. You can, I'm going to open up the chat lines at different times. We're going to have some polls. It's a technological circus of fun here. And then later we're going to have Q&A. So hold your questions, think about them. I'm going to be here for sure 30 minutes. I can stay over a little if there are lots and lots of questions. I really want to hear from you. So I'm going to talk about what I see in the field as a psychotherapist for nearly 30 years, what I've been seeing, but more importantly is how I can help you. And that'll come later. And remember, you don't need to take notes, right? Let this material just wash over you. Experience it, see what comes. There's going to be a webinar hub, and there'll be documents in that cover what I talk about. So just be here, land here, see what resonates, see what sticks. So I guess with that, I want to dive in to the material. So I wrote this book, The Emotionally Exhausted Woman, which comes out in November, because of what I see in my psychotherapy practice, what I see in the field, what I see with friends, what I see every single day with women. And I see getting worse, interestingly, is that we women are depleted. We are emotionally exhausted. And that's a really big topic. That's a really big sort of set of words I'm using there. But what people describe over and over again is this feeling of being cut off from something fundamental, their own vitality, cut off from their authenticity. And we're not just exhausted physically. You know, there's a lot of attention in the media on our physical exhaustion. We do too much. We know all that. There have been thousands of books covered on that. But we're emotionally depleted. We're spiritually depleted. We're psychically depleted because we have left something fundamental behind. And we don't even know what that is anymore. We're so, in some ways, so far away from something authentic that we don't know where to look anymore. So it's not really just about doing too much. It's about being too much. We are being too many things for too many people. And along the way, we've lost a connection to ourselves. We're being too much, not doing too much. Those are different. And the medicine that we're taking, like these manicures and facials, because I've studied the self-care industry very deeply, and it's part of the book. The medicine we're taking, these sound baths and, loofah sponges and so on, hemp seed oil wraps, they're not working. They're the wrong medicine for what ails us. So I just want to do a quick poll while I've got you, which is how many of you resonate with what I'm saying? Do you resonate? You completely identify with this sense of emotional depletion, emotional exhaustion? Do you somewhat identify? Do you not identify at all and you're actually going to be leaving the webinar now? I'm gonna just put that out to you just so I see where we're starting from. Give that a little bit of 10 seconds or so to see what you find. Let's see what you all say. Okay, so, wow, this is good. 62% completely identify. You're in the right webinar. 38% somewhat identify. And I love this number, 0 don't identify. Fantastic. So I'm going to say that again. 62% of you. Wow. That's wonderful. I mean, that's not wonderful, but that's a good thing for being here. Yeah. So, okay, I am going to just think about that number. That's enormous. But at this stage, I want to take a little bit of a step back. I want to go a little general. And I want to talk about something called the perfect woman. So I first heard this term. I'm sorry, I'm getting a chat in here which says, okay, yeah, so there's chat coming in. I'm going to open up the chat in a moment and I'm going to be looking over there, but I won't be looking over there until I officially say I'm going to open up the chat and look. So this term, the perfect woman, I first heard the perfect woman, I think I was 12 or 13. And my uncle was telling a story where he was talking about a friend of his. And the friend apparently went out pretty much every night. He was a married guy. And the implication was he was with women, he was drinking, he had a whole life at night. But every night, he at some point would call his wife and just to check in. And every night, my uncle was sharing that she would say the very same thing to him, which was, whenever you get home, I'll be here waiting. And I remember at 12 or 13, all the men in the room were hooting and hollering, oh my God, that's amazing. Where do I get that woman? What a perfect woman. First time I heard that term. And I think even at 12 or 13, I knew not to say anything. I knew not to express my confusion that was somehow the perfect woman. But in my family, in my upbringing, and I certainly hear this a lot in my practice, a woman who has, maybe I could even go so far as to say no needs. She doesn't have needs, right? Whatever you want to do, you go out there, you do your thing. I'm here waiting. No needs a very good thing for a woman to have. We're conditioned early to know that. Or maybe some of the other things, sweet, right? Accommodating, selfless, that's a really big one. Giving, generous, available. These are some of the ones that I hear all the time in the field. Self-sacrificing. One I hear interestingly often is mysterious. A woman who's mysterious. So we don't really know how she's so perfect, but she shows up as perfect. I'm curious if some of you could write into the chat to share with me what are some of the words that you hear in your head when you are thinking of the perfect woman. Let's see what we get. Humble, absolutely humble. Yes, passive, selfless, skinny. I forgot skinny. Oh my gosh. Yes, giving. Strong, confident, nice. Nice is so big, balanced. Oh my goodness. Yes. Passionate, always available. We know that one. Gracious. Yes. Giving. Yes. We have been conditioned in the same world, it seems, right? So this is a part of our early training, right? This webinar is going to be a lot about how do we get to this place of exhaustion. Thank you for those fabulous, and they're still coming in and making me laugh. But also when we're learning about how to be, right, we're also learning about how not to be, right? So when we are being celebrated, let's say we have one cookie and we break it in half, yeah? And, you know, we give the good, solid, bigger half of the cookie to our brother, and we keep the broken one that's this small, but we want the big one, but we do it the other way. When we're learning, that gets us celebrated, that gets us loved, that gets us cherished. We're also learning, more importantly maybe, and the stronger message is who not to be. Who not to be. Such a big part of our early conditioning. So the imperfect woman, right, maybe on your list, I'm going to give you my list and then I'm going to open it up again. But on my list was, or still is, right, selfish, demanding, difficult, a bother, impossible to please. Big one, controlling, high maintenance, aggressive. Let's see, these are just off the top of my head. A Karen, you know, now we have a name for it, a diva. I don't know if I can use the word bitch, but I just did. There are lots of them. So I want to hear from you all. What are some of the ones that you hear that you should not be? Let me see what comes in. I love these kind of questions. Let's see. What are you not supposed to be? I'm going to open up the chat line. I'm going to let those start to come in while I talk. But essentially, we are learning not to be those things because they make us lose our sense of belonging. That's why. That we find out that we're not loved if we are any of these things. So we're conditioned heavily to not be many things, to not be many, many things. And, you know, I'll give you a couple examples. A woman in my office yesterday was telling me how exhausted she was. And when I asked her why she was so exhausted, she told me that she had taken a night flight and that she didn't ask for a pillow because she didn't want to be a bother to the flight attendant. And in a more global example, one that I use in the book, I was having lunch with a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, incredibly successful, beautiful, inside and out woman. And she ordered toast. And I heard her tell the waiter, no butter on the toast. I heard her have the courage to say that. And I saw the waiter not write anything down. And because I didn't want to be called, I didn't want to be called controlling, I didn't say to him, did you write that down? Sure enough, 10 minutes later, the butter comes covered the butter on the toast comes. And I saw that happen, and I saw my friend not eat it. And I just thought to myself, I'm going to ask her why. I'm writing this book. I'm going to ask her why. And when I asked her, why didn't you send that back? Right? You were very, very clear. And, you know, she said to me, she said, Nancy, I can't fight it today. I can't be that woman. I can't be that woman that is all of the things that I will be called. And I can't face it today. I know I should fight the good fight for women. And that response, and so she just left it there and she didn't eat it because she couldn't deal with all of the judgments that would come in. And that just convinced me, you got to keep writing this book. Because what happens is that we twist ourselves into pretzels. We don't just give up toast. We give up a lot to not be judged, to stay emotionally safe. We give up a lot. And our energy, right, goes into not being judged, not being labeled as all of these things. So, you know, we're talking about depletion, we're talking about exhaustion. This is where our energy is going. This is where our energy is going into being how we're supposed to be liked and be pleasing, and into not being whatever will make us rejected and ostracized and emotionally unsafe. And of course, it makes complete sense. Look, you know, if you take animals, right, when you don't belong and you're left out of the herd, you die. Our need to belong is a primal need. It makes us safe. So we do all of this from our conditioning. Who are we supposed to be so that we're included and we're safe? Yeah. So we've got all of this cultural conditioning coming at us strong. And what that creates, right, is it creates a kind of likability. I call it a likability cage. And the cage, right, is what it is a set of circumstances that we have to fit into in order to stay safe, right? And it cuts us off from our fundamental vitality. We are cut off from our energy source because we're trying to stay safe in the cage. And what happens is we no longer even know what we are. We don't know our wants and needs anymore. We know what we need to do to be safe. We know what people want. We know how to make that happen. We're really good at it. But we don't really know anymore what's authentic. What do we want and need, right? The smaller we get, the less touch we have with our authentic wants and needs. So I want to do a quick poll once again and see how many of you feel imprisoned or constricted by the pressure to be pleasing or to be liked. Most of the time, do you feel that? Frequently, sometimes, or not at all? Do you feel that pressure that I'm describing? This kind of knowing what you need to be and monitoring yourself to some degree to make sure you're not judged, you're not perceived in a certain way. I think even at 12 or 13, I knew, don't be labeled, I don't know what it would have been at that age, hormonal or, you know, sort of too female in some way if I had responded to that perfect woman image. Do you twist yourself around a little bit into pretzels to avoid these judgments? And maybe do you even feel the constriction of that? Let's see what the poll comes to. Okay, so most of the time, wow, 37%, frequently 40%, sometimes 23%, and not at all 1%. wow, I want to meet you. I don't know if we have any men in this seminar, but could be you. I'm just kidding with you. But that's wonderful. And that helps me know we're on track. But, you know, what I'm talking about is how all of this affects our authentic wants and needs. And we can't really have a conversation about authentic wants and needs without talking about how we were raised. I just want to tip my hat to that. And, you know, being a psychotherapist, we always have that a little bit in our background sort of consciousness, right? When we're coming up in a home, we're really learning about wants and needs. We're learning about how to get our emotional needs met. We're learning, is it safe to get our emotional needs? Is it safe to express them? Is it safe to have them? It's all happening in the background, but we're getting our very first conditioning about our own wants and needs and what kind of relationship to have with our wants and needs. It's our first conditioning. And, you know, as I've been saying, this who to be and who not to be puts us in conflict with something authentic about our wants and needs, which then depletes us, which then exhausts us. And in this early training, we're learning, you know, how do mommy and daddy respond to our wants and needs? Do we have to tuck them away? Let's say, I don't know, maybe you grew up in a home that was very cold, very, very emotionally cold. We learn, right, that wants and needs are not important. They're not on the table. So right away, you've got a relationship with your own wants and needs that's conflicted, because we always have wants and needs, but nobody's going to respond to them. Or let's say, I don't know, you grew up in a home that it was all about getting food on the table. And so, you know, the idea of emotional needs was absurd, right? Emotional needs that nobody's paying attention to. It's about getting fed, getting jobs, and so on. So we learn, you know, oh, that's an extra. That's on top of what's essential. So we tuck them away. Or maybe your emotional needs made your parents or one parent angry. And so we learn emotional needs are dangerous. But what we're learning in these early environments is how to get our needs met. Can they be met? And what are the ways we need to sort of, again, twist ourselves around to get our needs met? My basic premise being, when we are in a conflicted relationship with our own authentic experience, our wants and needs, when that's conflicted, then we are depleted. So I'm talking about our depletion in a radically different way than the way our media and our culture talks about them. So this whole conundrum that I'm describing, you know, the conditioning of who to be, who not to be, the conditioning from our early home environment, what it creates is a backpack full of core beliefs about our own wants and needs, a backpack that we don't even know we're wearing. That's the thing about core beliefs. Our core beliefs are beliefs that there they are, and we're acting them out all the time, but we don't even realize that we're believing them. And it's kind of the after we've taken in all of this conditioning, we walk around with these core beliefs. So I'll give you just some of the biggies, some of the sort of greatest hits that I see out in the field. The first one is, you know, I don't deserve to have my emotional needs met. I don't deserve them. You know, Jane's on chemo, right? She had 6 treatments, and she didn't have a peep. Not a peep out of her. She never needed anything. Who am I to need something? How many people? I hear that all day long. I don't deserve it. It's selfish. It's indulgent, right? Everybody seems to be okay without. We're constantly comparing. How can I have emotional needs? It's not an inherent right. I have to do something to deserve that. Big one for women, right? A second one I hear all the time is just to have needs is weak, right? It's unattractive, it's icky. and going further from that, needs make me needy. Needs make me icky. Needs make me unattractive. Right? We have this idea in our culture that not having needs is somehow strong, is somehow brave. Imagine this basic human experience, right? Is somehow weak. That's madness. It's utter madness. Another one that I hear all the time is, my needs are my fault. So somehow this idea that I'm choosing this need that I have, if I'm utterly exhausted and I just need a break, I need quiet, or I need whatever it is, right? That I'm choosing that. I could choose another need. I could be grateful for everything that I have, right? It's my fault. So now I've got the need that I've got, and I'm to blame for it. So we call that in Buddhism, we call that the second arrow. We've got both now. Another core belief that I hear all the time from women about their own wants and needs is that if I acknowledge my needs, I will fall apart. They'll be so big, they'll be so overwhelming that I won't be able to take care of all the people that I need to take care of. I won't be able to do all the things and be all the things, so that they will just engulf me. They will make me fall apart. And, another common core belief that always is so remarkable to me in this day and age is that if I need anything, I somehow am not appreciating what I have, right? So, my family takes me out for a beautiful sushi dinner, and what I really want is not to spend $500 for me. I want a diner dinner with lots of food and not 3 tiny pieces. And yet I can't deeply appreciate their efforts to take good care of me, and also want something different or need something different for that evening, right? Somehow everything is connected with a but, not an and. If I want or I need for anything, it means that I'm utterly ungrateful and unappreciative for what I have. So these are some of the core beliefs that we walk around with, and they deplete us. They exhaust us. Because imagine this backpack. It's so heavy. It's so heavy, and it's filled with all these beliefs that ultimately have us turning against ourselves, turning against our authenticity. And when we don't realize it, we don't even realize we're carrying this around. We're turning on ourselves, abandoning our own wants and needs for all of these reasons I'm naming. We are stuck. We're stuck. And so what we want to start doing is taking that backpack and unpacking it. We unpack that backpack because awareness is freedom. Awareness is our kryptonite, right? We unpack it so that we don't have to keep acting it out. We don't have to keep denying our own wants and needs. We don't have to keep turning away from them and not getting what we want and need, and staying in this state of chronic depletion and imagining that that's life, imagining that that's just the way life is. So we have this incredible depletion because of these core beliefs that comes from our conditioning. And then in comes our culture, and we treat this depletion, this exhaustion, with self-care. That's our answer. That's our culture's answer. We have this $11 billion industry, $11 billion industry that tells us how to take care of ourselves. Yeah. And so I read something somewhere that said that self-care in 2021 was the most Googled term. So we're listening, right? And us women are its prime targets, right? So we're going out And we're getting the manicures. We are. We're getting the manicures. We're getting the pedicures. Tell me, I'm going to open the chat line again. What are some of the techniques you use? These, I call them outside in self-care practices, because I'm going to distinguish that from inside out self-care, which is where we're heading. But I'm curious about if you can tell me massage, absolutely. Hiking, beautiful. Massage. Getting my hair done, naps, beautiful. Yoga, gardening, lovely soaps, pedicures, yes. Walking on the beach, yeah. Facials, love that. Beautiful. So we're doing all these things, but it's kind of a paradox. Keep them coming. I'm getting ideas too, because there's nothing wrong with them, right? This is not a webinar about doing away with these lovely outside-in practices. What it is recognizing that these outside-in practices are not just the wrong solution. They're not just temporary superficial fixes for what is a systemic problem, a way deeper problem. But they actually strengthen the bars of our cage. They strengthen the bars of our likability cage. So I want to explain why I'm saying that. So I also want to point out before I do that, that it is so paradoxical. We cannot forget that we've never spent more money on self-care, and yet we've never been less well. So all we talk about is well-being, and our stress levels are the highest they've ever been. So we need to keep that kind of in the sidebar here. Whatever we're doing, it's not working. It's lovely and it distracts us for a bit, but it's not working for this fundamental depletion that we're all walking, not all, I think a lot of us are walking around with, assuming it's just part of living as a woman. It's not. So why do I say it strengthens the bars? First of all, our self-care becomes another should. It's another should on our to-do list. How many times a day? I certainly hear it all day long, and my clients hear it all day long. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you? No, really. Are you? Are you spending enough time, walking in nature? Are you? It becomes a kind of responsibility. So it actually is something else we have to do to prove that we're taking good care of ourselves. It's another should. The second thing is that it's, again, farming out our own well-being to others, to an external source. It's saying someone else knows what we need, right? Someone else is the expert on our fundamental wants and needs, on our truth, dare I say truth, right? So again, we're looking outside ourselves again for the answer. Can never work. It'll never heal our fundamental depletion if we're looking outside ourselves. We have the key in our pocket. The key is in our pocket. The depletion is because we don't know that. So anything that's turning us away from our own knowing is turning us in the wrong direction. The third reason it strengthens the bars and is the wrong medicine is that it distracts us from what we really want and need under the manicure. What do we really need? Do we need silence? Do we need to be listened to? Do we need to be comforted? Do we need a break from all the to-dos? Do we need our own attention? What do we really need that all of the cashmere wraps and the chocolate almonds infused with coconut oil are distracting us from? And a fourth reason is that self-care is sort of code I'm going to remove the sort of, is code for self-improvement. Ultimately, what we learn early in this culture is that our task as women is to become a better version of ourselves, and that we're never really enough. We're never really fully baked, right? We're always in a state of improvement and getting better. And while there's nothing wrong with self-improvement, we have to keep evolving. It's part of life. But it's a very strong message. Never rest where you are. It's never okay to be enough. It's part of our depletion. We've got to keep striving. So when we're talking about self-care, we're often talking about become a better version of ourselves. But at the end of the day, the way our culture has framed self-care is that it's something that we buy or do rather than something that we are. It's something that we buy or do rather than something that we are. So doing self-care is not the same thing as being self-caring. I mean, imagine we have a system that we buy into that tells us that it's reasonable to need a Post-it note to take care of yourself. Remember to take care of yourself. There's something fundamentally flawed with this system if we need a Post-it note to care about ourselves. Do we need a Post-it note to care about our children, our friends, our loved ones, our partners? So there's something for me that just seems radically out of alignment if that's the case. But that's because, again, we're looking at self-care as an outside-in process. True self-care, self-caring, because it's a verb, has to do with our own relationship with our own wants and needs. It's how we relate to ourselves. It's the inner ecosystem. So what is true self-caring, right? What does that mean? Boots on the ground. What does that mean? What does it look like? How do we live it? So there are 4 pillars. I mean, the truth is it's infinite. It's infinite what that means. But for the purposes of this hour, I have boiled it down, and from 30 years of being a therapist with women and hundreds of interviews with women, I have boiled it down to 4 pillars. The first pillar is this distinction between should and want. So the way we're doing should and want right now is that should is the loudest voice. Should is really, really strong. And we should do this and this and this, because if we do this and this and this, it makes who we are good. And we all know, as we've talked about, what good looks like and what not good looks like, what belonging looks like, what not belonging looks like. So we've got this really strong should voice that's hooked up with that conditioning. And it's kind of death by a thousand shoulds, or in this case, depletion by 1,000 should. It drains us. It drains us. And what it does is it disconnects us from want. The more involved with should that we are, the more disconnected we are from want. And we're so disconnected from want that want starts to atrophy. So all we know is what we should do. All we know is what will make us likable and pleasing. We don't even know what want sounds like anymore. We've stopped hearing that still small voice, that whisper. If we're really lucky, the whisper starts to speak louder or shout at us. But for so many of us, it atrophies. And this is a fundamentally important distinction that we need to start getting back in touch with. And so how do we start doing that? What is this pillar of self-care relating to should and want? First of all, we have to become aware. We have to become aware. So we have to start asking ourselves, is this choice, is this whatever it is, coming from should or want? Where's it coming from? 95% of the time, it's coming from should, if we're lucky, right? And when that's the case, we want to start again. Awareness is kryptonite. Awareness is freedom. So if it's a should, why do we think we should? And again, we do this without judgment. We do this with curiosity. Why do we think we should? What do we think it will bring us? Right? And what are we afraid of if we don't? So we're starting to separate out should from want. And what do we believe will happen if we don't follow this should? We also can ask the question, if it's a should, and this is again, not to remove shoulds from our life. We need shoulds. We need to be functioning people in the world. But it's to start to become more aware of where our behavior and where our choices are coming from. If it's a should, I mean, my goal here is not to turn us into non-functional people who just run around like 5-year-olds and do what we want. It's not that. It's to build a more conscious and loving relationship with ourselves. That's really what heals our depletion. But if it's a should, then maybe there's a want below the should. So I don't know, maybe I should exercise because I want to be around for my kids, because I want to be healthy. So let's find the want so it's more connected to that. Or if it's a should, then maybe it's not black and white. Maybe there's a way to create more balance. So if it's a should exercise, maybe a couple days a week, I could take a walk with a friend instead of getting on the treadmill at 5:30 in the morning. Maybe there's room for both want and should, a little bit of both. Maybe it's not so black and white. Or if it's a should that's really hard and there's no way around it, maybe what I want to do, I have to have lunch with my mother-in-law, right, next week. It's a hard one. It's a tough one. It's not an easy thing to do. And at the same time, it aligns with my core values. It matters to me that I do that. She's not well. So I'm doing that because that relationship is important to me. It's important to my husband and so on. So when I go into that lunch, I don't go with this big should that's against me. I go on my own side. You're doing something hard. You're doing something hard because it aligns with something fundamentally important to you. So we go with that sense of connection to the should and a sense of kindness for ourselves, right? And at the end of the day, right, what we're wanting is to start to introduce want more and more as a regular contemplation in our life, this force that's been so absent for so many of us. So what would it mean if you started to ask yourself what you want? What would it mean if you were to start living your life from want? Oh my God. I asked a woman in my office that the other day, and she said, oh my God, I wouldn't do probably 98% of what I do if I lived from want. Well, we need to look at that. We need to take that seriously. So just getting into this conversation with want and should, so important. Pillar number one. The second pillar of self-care is, and I have to say, this is my personal favorite, is tell the truth. Sounds so basic, doesn't it? Sounds so basic. For us women, it's the hardest thing to do. Tell the truth without apologizing or adding anything on. So the way we do it now, right, is we tell a piece of our truth, try and express our wants and needs but then do a whole lot of sweetening, massaging, managing, distorting, so that the other person can be okay with our truth. That is so ingrained in us, right? We try and say something true, but we cannot allow the other person to be uncomfortable or disappointed with our truth. So it's, again, coming back to this sense of being drained and having our energy going in the wrong direction. So much energy is going into trying to make all these different things work and work for the other person so that we are still likable. And I'm noticing a chat in here that says, why does mother-in-law have a negative ring? That's my mother-in-law. That's not you. That's my mother-in-law. I should have identified that. I just wanted to respond to that. That's beautiful, Leslie Ann. But coming back to this issue of managing the other person's experience, wow, does that drain us of energy so that we can stay safe ultimately. But we give up so much of our authenticity when we are mostly focused on keeping the other person's experience positive. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of when we do that differently. So Fiona, a client of mine, it was 3 days before her 40th birthday, and her husband came to her and said, I've been really busy at work and I haven't had a chance to get you a present. And she's a real foodie too, this woman. And he said, and I've been calling around just this last day and all the reservations are taken. So, maybe we'll just hang out for that night and then we'll do your birthday another night. And she very kindly and respectfully, we've been working together for a little bit of time. She said, I'd really love to do something on my 40th birthday, and I'd really love a gift on that day. And then she stopped speaking. She just stopped speaking right there. So she didn't jump through hoops to say, oh, it's okay. She did for me this lovely impersonation of who she would have been a year ago, which was, it's fine. Thank you just even for thinking of me. That's okay. That's really wonderful. I really appreciate you trying it all. We'll do it another time. She gave me that performance. But this time she just said kindly and respectfully, you know what I would love? I would love that. And then stopped speaking. And she said to me, that's the greatest birthday present I could ever get from myself. In another example, Astrid, who was another client, she was approached by a colleague that had suggested her for another position in the company. And the colleague was quite proud of herself for presenting Astrid as a potential colleague candidate. And she told this to Astrid very excitedly. And Astrid said, I appreciate your thinking of me, and it's not the direction actually that I'm wanting to go right now in the company. And she said to me, 6 months ago, I might have said, oh, wonderful, I can't wait for the interview, and thank you so much, and would have gone for the interview and maybe even taken the job. And her biggest concern might have been to make this woman feel incredibly proud of herself and appreciated. And this time she thanked her and was respectful and said, that's not the direction, and then put it to bed, stopped speaking. And this is so profound for women, which is to say that we are responsible for our truth, and we are not to blame for another person's experience of that truth. Again, our energy goes into this management. And what's so curious to me always is that we can handle disappointment. We can handle discomfort. And yet our assumption is that we cannot allow anyone else to have that experience. Otherwise, we're to blame for it. So what I'm suggesting here in this pillar, excuse me, which is quite important, is that we take care of presenting our truth kindly and respectfully, and then we surrender the results. So we can have an experience and someone else can have an experience of that experience, and they can be separate. So I am not here to say that other people's experience doesn't matter. Of course it does. It's just to release us from this responsibility that everybody have a pleasing experience with us at the cost of our own well-being, at the cost of our own vitality, at the cost of our own authenticity, which is our energy source. That's the second pillar. So actually, let me throw out a poll to you, which is when you imagine telling the truth without apologizing, without calling yourself any names. Oh, I know I'm high maintenance. Oh, I know that's difficult. I know, without putting yourself down and without immediately sweetening the deal for the other, right? What does that feel like? Does that make you feel excited and thrilled? Does that make you feel hopeful and interested? Does it make you feel frightened, but with an optimistic sort of twist to it? Frightened with a pessimistic twist, or not an option? Just curious. I wanna give you a few seconds to weigh in on that. This changes people's lives, this pillar. All that energy going out to making sure you're okay with my wants and needs, with my truth, that comes back to ourselves. That comes back to ourselves. And boy, do we see that in spades when it comes back. It's done. We just say what's true. And then, wow, we let the other person have the experience they're having, which we care about and we can attend to, but it's not our fault. Yeah. So let's see what these polls bring in. Okay. So excited and thrilled, 8%. Hopeful with an interested spin is 24%. Frightened with an optimistic edge is 40%. Frightened, pessimistic, 27%. And 1% not an option. I hope that not an option person asks me a question at the end. I want to bump you up, even if it's to frightened and pessimistic. But there's a lot. What I like to see is that we've got 40, 24, that's 64, 72% are above the pessimistic line into the optimistic range. So this is good. Okay. So we're going to move to the next pillar, which is, I call it the big turnaround. The big turnaround. So let me start with how we do it now. Our partner, let's say, I'm going to come up with something off the top of my head. Let's say there's a ladder in our house and we just broke our arm, and so we can't climb up the ladder, and we ask our partner to get something we need from the loft. We need it. We ask, nothing happens. 3-4 days later, we ask again, nothing happens. 4 or 5 days later, we ask again, and boom, nag, nag, nag. Why do you always nag, right? Why are you so difficult to please? Why don't you notice everything I do around the house, right? Why are you so controlling? Okay, I hear this all day long in my office. So why are you so fill in the blank? And then that woman often comes in my office and tells me she's a nag, right? Tells me she's a nag. I get it. I don't see that. I see this partner as perhaps not being empathic. But what we do as women, you know, to such a degree that I'm using it as a pillar, is we define ourselves by the perceptions of others. So I'm giving a very extreme example, but we do this in so many ways that we are constantly taking someone else's perception of us and using it as proof that that's who we are. And now it becomes our responsibility to positivize your experience of me so that I can like me, right? So if I have a problem with something going on with a friend and that friend experiences that as me being difficult or me being high maintenance or me being whatever it is, I've got to change that in order to hold on to this experience of myself as positive. So we give authorship of our own identity to others. We allow others to write our story. So, the big turnaround is when we join our own side. The big turnaround is when we stop and we ask ourselves, wait a minute, do I think that's nagging? You wouldn't believe how radical a question that is for so many women. What do you think about what you said or did? Do you think that was fair to call you a nag when you needed that thing from the loft and you did ask and you did wait? Is that okay to call you that? So when we're giving ourselves permission to self-define, to self-identify, then now we're starting to live in a self-caring way. So that's the turnaround. Ask yourself, what do you think about what you did? What was your intention in doing that? Ask yourself. Take ownership for your own self-identity. What do you think of you? Of course it matters what other people think. I'm not turning us into raging narcissists here, but we forget that part. Were you okay with asking your partner to get that a third time? So I'm going to go over a little bit here, talk a little bit longer. The fourth pillar is welcoming all of you. Welcoming all of you. So what we do now, right, that's where I always like to start, is we allow certain parts of ourselves a seat at our inner table and other parts of ourselves not a seat at our inner table. And again, fundamental cause of our depletion, because parts of us are welcome and parts of us aren't. We cannot have access to our fundamental vitality and our energy if only parts of our authentic nature are welcome. And again, why are they not welcome? Because they will make us excluded. They will make us not good and not belong. So we've got to start to open up the table here. So whatever is true inside of us is loved, is within this container. So let's take the example of Nikki. Nikki has what everybody or many people want. She's got this great career. She's got a loving family. She's got lovely kids. It's all working, right? And our favorite word in the welcoming pillar. And she also longs for the spontaneity she used to feel before domestic bliss. She longs for adventure. She longs for a life that isn't so known, so far ahead of time and adventure and all of these yummy things she had. And that part of her is not welcome, because what comes is, how dare you? You have what everybody wants, right? So where do those parts that are real go? Where does that longing for spontaneity and the unknown and this fire in her, where does it go, right? Well, for her, it went into a bottle of Chardonnay at the end of the night, 2 or 3 glasses at dinner every night, or it went into a night of Netflix every night. You know, it got medicated out of consciousness. But of course, it doesn't make it go away. So when I talk about this pillar of welcoming all of ourselves, it's about letting ourselves be who we are. That these contrary or coexisting truths be allowed to coexist. I love my family. I love my career. I love this domestic bliss. And there's a part of me that misses a different life I had, and accepts, a part of me accepts that for this period of time, that's not possible, right? The whole of who we are, all of it. It can't just be, we can't cherry pick parts of ourselves to welcome, because what happens is when we cut ourselves off from part of our truth, we cut ourselves off from ourselves. And we can't be cut off from ourselves and not feel depleted. So this is a long way from a manicure and pedicure. It's a long way from that hemp-infused body lotion. This is the real deal. This is self-caring. Self-caring has to include the parts of us that we think are acceptable and the parts of us that we call unacceptable. Because the truth is, as women, as human beings, we've got all of it. The whole crazy conundrum, the whole enchilada, the whole, as one friend of mine says, catastrophe. It's all there. How could we just want one thing? How could we just want this? We have other parts. And when we stop seeing those other parts as so dangerous to our likability, so dangerous to our acceptability, which is insane because everybody contains all these parts, right? So when we say, yeah, you too get a seat at the table, you too, I hear from the whole gang, right? And it includes everything. When we can really be that loving container for our own wants and needs, doesn't mean we have to act them out, because she could make room for her longing for spontaneity and adventure, right? Meant that it could just have a seat there. She didn't have to go out and leave her family and get on a plane. She could just say, wow, yeah, that's the deal. You know, for now, I'm in this domestic bliss and it comes with this. We have this incredible capacity that we don't even give ourselves credit for. So acknowledge your parts, acknowledge all of it. If you turn away from it, you suffer, we suffer, all of us. So even if the culture is saying this part of you makes you bad, inside yourself, you're saying all of it is welcome. That's the fourth pillar. So that's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. And again, you're going to get a handout in the webinar that has all of this. Hopefully some of it is resonating with you. These are really, really big things. And it's important to say here that, you know, we don't get to this place of self-abandonment, of turning away from our wants and needs and having to be so likable and pleasing. We don't get here overnight. It's very, very ingrained in our system, in our culture, in our homes, in our, all of it. So it's not your fault if you feel some of these things. It's not your fault if you err on the side of being pleasing and likable, right? And they don't go away overnight, but they go away with practice. They change with practice. So you start small. I don't know, maybe the next time you order a coffee, maybe you say there's too much milk in it. Yeah. Maybe you say, actually, this is too light. I asked for it dark. And then you stop speaking. Again, you don't call yourself names for that. You ask for something small. And then you pay attention later in the day. Do you feel less resentful? I don't know. Do you feel that there's less going on in your mind about why am I never heard? Why does it not matter what I say? Do you, I don't know, do you feel more energized just because you get to drink the coffee and like it? Because it's the way you like it. Yeah. Or maybe when you come home and your partner's in a bad mood, maybe you refrain from asking yourself what you did wrong that morning that caused the bad mood. You catch that it's my fault as your default, that conditioned it's my fault if you're not having a good experience with me. You just catch it and remind yourself, maybe I don't need to figure out why my partner's in a bad mood, and maybe I didn't do something. So it's these little small ways that we start to practice. It doesn't go away overnight, but it really does change when we bring consciousness to it. Awareness is freedom. Awareness is freedom. And I think I'll finish today with just a little story. It's one of my favorite stories, which is, it's of a wild gazelle. And so the wild gazelle, early in its life, she had smelled this perfume somewhere in the forest that took her breath away. And she spent her life searching to find that perfume, searching to locate it. Behind every tree, under every bush, she looked. And then one day she was hit by a hunter's arrow. And as she lay dying, as her flank was cut open, coming from inside of her, she smelled that perfume. She smelled that aroma. And she realized that that perfume she had chased her entire life was coming from inside of her. So I leave you with that story to make of it what you will. But just to know that the answer to your depletion, the answer to your own exhaustion is in your own pocket. It's in your relationship with yourself. And you have that. You already have it. So walk with that, shower with that, eat with that, contemplate that. And I look forward to your Q&A and to your Q. I guess I provide the A. And thank you for your attention. So you can use, I'm being prompted, you can use the Q&A button to ask a question and try and keep them concise if you can.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nancy. That was amazing. You can also ask anonymously and upvote questions if you wish. And also a reminder that Therese will be joining us to host the Q&A as well. Therese, are you with us?
I am.
Perfect.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Great. That was a fabulous presentation. Just a couple of things before we start the question. I noticed there were quite a few comments about guilt and feeling guilt. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Boy, isn't that a big one? That is something that we women really struggle with. We struggle with that, again, because of this basic belief that we are responsible for everyone else's experience. So that is a core belief, which, what if that's not so? What if that basic premise is not so? Which is not to say that we don't care about another person's experience. Empathy does not have to come with guilt. So that's what I'm trying to separate here, right? That if we feel guilty, it's because somehow the other person's experience of our truth or of something, right, makes us to blame. And the truth is, if we're stuck in guilt, we're not really feeling empathy. It's not the same thing. If I feel guilty, I've got to correct that because I need to feel better. If I feel empathy, wow, I don't want you to feel bad. But that makes me sad that you feel bad. but it's a different thing entirely than this urgency because I need to stop feeling guilty, right? So we just start to contemplate. This is a deep, deep issue. It goes back to early, early childhood, right? Where we're made to blame. But we first have to start to even consider, what if I am not the cause of everyone else's experience? Because also in this sort of chronic guilt is a kind of strangely, we struggle with this sort of, I'm the center of everything. And I don't mean that as another blaming, but somehow I'm to blame for everything, as if we are that important, right? What if the other person has their own whole experience, whole universe that isn't about us and just what we did? It's quite liberating, right? Maybe I don't know why this other person is suffering. Imagine I shut down that not knowing by saying, it's because of me. It's all because of me. Well, maybe I work with people in tolerating, maybe I don't know why. That opens up so much space and actually opens up so much empathy, because it's saying, you tell me why it is that it's this way, why there's sadness about that, or what have you, right? If I don't jump to my immediate assumption, it's because of me. How narrow, right? I don't know. So we start to play with other ways of looking at that core belief, and also that assumption, I'm to blame if another is not okay. Why?
Okay, so Nancy, we have quite a few questions, so we're gonna try and at least get some of these addressed. There's a question here from Janice who says, my husband says I'm controlling when I ask him to clean up after himself, for example. So what's the best way to respond? It's exhausting when it ends in a fight, and I'm worried that the kids are watching, so I become silent and I walk away.
Yeah, oh boy, do I hear your story over and over and over again. So I just want to bring you a moment of compassion there. So walking away and swallowing it, depletion, straight route to depletion, disconnect from your authentic experience, really difficult, really difficult. We got to find a way in there that leaves room for your truth. I understand it gets really complicated. I'm also a couples therapist, so it's not lost on me. It triggers defensiveness, it triggers anger, there's a lot of things that go on in these little interactions. So what I like to offer whatever partner, female or male, that's in that situation, is to be very clear about owning your own want. So, hey, partner, it's important to me, I find that I am much happier and more peaceful and can go to bed at night when the place is clean. That's important to me, right? And so I'm wondering, just based on that, I understand for you, it might not be what's important, but for me, that makes a really big difference. And it makes a really big difference when you take care of that, just because it's important to me, right? And I understand that I could do that. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to clean up, just because that makes a really big difference for me. So I overemphasize for me, because again, couples get into this situation where it's like we have to agree. You don't have to agree. I'm owning that my experience is that I feel much better. And we put, better language around that. I'm able to rest. It just calms me down. I think it's best if we don't use sort of judgments and criticisms that makes me controlling. I'm just owning that it just makes a difference in my life if it's clean. And I don't know, Could that be just respected without it being labeled anything? Kind of like that, you know, that sort of an attitude of, this is my ownership. I don't even need you to think it's a good thing. I don't need you to agree with me. But I do need you not to criticize it or label it. And I need you to hear that this is my truth, not yours. Not going near yours. Like that kind of an interchange.
Okay. We'll speed this up a little bit to see if we can get a few more questions answered. Can you repeat the mantra, so to speak, where you said something about voicing what you want? The second part was, then you surrender the response, I think.
Yeah. So we take ownership of our truth, like I'm doing with the cleaning up, and then how the other person responds to that, or how they find it. Do they find that disappointing? Did that coworker of Astrid's find it disappointing that she didn't want to take that interview? Well, I have to surrender the result of my truth. I take care of my side of the street. I do it respectfully. I do it with a certain amount of kindness. And then what becomes of that is not my responsibility. So that's where we're clipping off 50%, or for what many women is more than 50% of, well, how are you going to find that? Is that going to be okay with you? And now I have to start distorting and disconnecting and doing all these things that are so depleting and exhausting, right? I own my part. And now tell me, how is that for you, that that's my truth?
Okay. I'm going to combine a couple of themes of questions. There's some here that relate to choosing me time over your children. There's one person who said that she puts her kids in daycare even on her days off, and she's criticized for it because it's the only time that she has to unwind. And another saying, kids have a sport like soccer that they want you to come for, and the only problem is like from 7 to 9, that's about the only time, me time, that she gets. What do you have to say about that?
Part of our conditioning is that it is indulgent or selfish to want our own attention. That's madness. Madness. And as mothers, I'm a mom, we are taught to feel guilty for also wanting to be with ourselves, as if we're a non-space, as if we're not a destination. We have to start bucking that cultural conditioning. Of course, you need time to pay attention to you. You also matter. Our conditioning has set it up such that if you matter, it's at the expense of another. Hogwash. Hogwash. You matter and your kids matter. And guess what? We're raising, if you're raising, I don't care if it's daughters or sons, we have to model this. We have to model this for our children. We matter. And when you're grown up, dad or mom, you need to matter. Because we have offspring does not take us off the list of mattering. That does not make us indulgent. It makes us, it's like, you know, survival. You know, in one of the things that I'll just say a pet peeve I have is that we've created this sort of system where, you know, you have to put your own oxygen mask on to put others on. Well, that's wonderful. You have to fill your own bucket to fill other people's buckets. But it's still, we found a way to make our own attention so that we can take care of others, right? We sort of found a way to do it while we're still really focused on that. Just allows us to be, you know, giving. But I'm suggesting, no, we need to put our own oxygen mask on so that we can actually be well. Not so that we can be a better caretaker, so that we can care about this sentient being, yeah? So that we can also live boots on the ground that we matter.
Okay, so there's another set of questions that talks about if I don't do it, it basically doesn't get done. And here's a sample of that. I have started to ask clearly for what I want, but my partner dismisses it as too much ask and asks me why I've changed. Recently, I asked him to plan our 30th anniversary, and he told me he's not good at planning and too busy. In the end, I planned it and resented the entire weekend. How do I move forward?
I have so much compassion for this question. And again, all I can say is I hear this all day long. And there's no easy answer for this one. I'm gonna be, straight up with you. We, as women, often get caught in this dilemma, which is if we want it done, we have to accept that we are the one that wants it done. It is not the ideal solution. And yet, if our options are that we wait around and keep asking and feel resentful and feel angry and all sorts of strife happens in the relationship, or we do it and we own deeply, I want this. And the way to get it done is to do it, right? And I don't want to farm out to someone who may or may not do it, or certainly won't do it the way I like it done. I don't want to be in that place. I don't want to keep having to bite that hook. If those are our options, I do encourage women to own their own wanting of it and do it. And accept what is true. This is the truth about my partner. Doesn't mean I don't go to my partner and say, this is really important to me. I really wish that you would partner with me on doing it. Because what matters to me is that my wanting it matters to you. I can try and communicate that. Doesn't mean that our partner, male or female, will hear that. But if I really want it done, then this is the truth. Then I'm better off doing it and letting the resentment lift because it's what is. Do I want to live in that state of resentment? No. Do I want to keep biting the hook? Is he going to do it? Is she going to do it? No. So then, damn it, I'm going to do it.
If I can share a little tip, a long time ago, a very small tip, a very long time ago, I read the book, Women Are from Venus and Men Are from Mars. And I don't really remember much about the book except for one thing which I started doing, and that was when you ask a man to do something, to use the word would instead of will, could, are you able, but to use the word would. For some reason, to their ears, apparently, I don't know if they're wired that way, they hear it differently. And so I started doing that. So instead of, geez, do I always have to do this? Why can't you clean up the kitchen? Simply, would you clean up the kitchen? Question mark.
Beautiful.
And, they might sit there for a couple of minutes, but then they do it.
Yes.
So if I could just share that.
I wanted to add to that too. Such a beautiful point. It is one of the things that creates so much suffering in us is that we have a narrative about what they're not doing it means, right? And part of freedom is releasing ourselves. I finally got it that, for example, with my husband, he doesn't notice the things I notice. So it's not when I was in suffering mind, it's because he knows it's there, he's not doing it. I'm down the rabbit hole in hell, in a hellscape of my own creation. And then I opened to, he actually notices completely different things. And so then I feel a sense of freedom of he's not doing it because of all of these crazy storylines that we all have, but he's not doing it because he actually doesn't even see it. He doesn't see that that's sitting there, So, okay, now I'm not in a battle with this storyline. Part of our freedom comes in recognizing what's the story I'm in my head. That's not the story he's in. Okay, so he's not doing it. Yes, I get that, but it's not this vat of suffering.
Okay, and the comment here from Amanda that says, I am so trained not to have any of my own wants that I wouldn't know where to start. And doesn't that sound familiar to some of us, eh? or through some periods of our lives.
Gosh,
yeah,
it's heartbreaking to
yeah.
know how true that is. So we start by asking the question regularly, what do I want? And you're right that as I was describing inside that likability cage, it atrophies. And from all the shoulding ourselves to death, the shoulds and shoulds, we don't hear it anymore. So we have to start introducing the question, what would it mean if I lived from want? In this little moment, what do I actually want? Sometimes it takes 5 minutes before a sort of organic want that has energy in it comes, right? What do I want to do with my weekend or my holiday? What do I want? God, that's such a different question. So just start introducing it. It doesn't die. It just gets covered up by so much conditioning and should that it can't be heard under all the muffle. It's still there.
Okay, and someone is asking about the, okay, just hang on, I lost that question. Let me go to another one and I'll get that one back. Here is somebody, I thought this might be interesting for you and others. Someone is saying, I work 12 hours a day, shift work, but mostly a mix of schedule of days and night shift. Then I come home with 2 kitchen messes, often no cooked food, so I just leave it. If my husband or my kids cook or clean up, thank you. But if I don't want to be angry or feel guilty or do it after work as I'm already exhausted, can that be considered daily self-care?
100%. Yes.
Excellent.
A very simple answer. Very simple answer. Yes.
Okay.
And I would have a word with those children and that partner and mention that you're very tired when you come home, and would you be willing to just have it be clean?
Yeah. And Sarah is asking, do the pillars happen simultaneously or do they build off one another?
Great question. The pillars happen in whatever way they need to happen inside you. So what I like for people to do is to have them all sort of percolating inside you. Have them all there. So you're thinking about them, you're taking them into your heart, you're just imagining them in different situations. What would that pillar look like here? And whichever one come, they come, right? And some are going to be harder than others. Some are going to be more exciting than others. So let the process happen, but your work is to keep introducing them and see which ones take.
Okay, and someone is saying here, basically when you start saying what you need, then a spouse is saying that you are never happy or nothing pleases you when you expressed, your concern about something or felt not heard. And that question comes from Deborah.
Deborah, you are in the majority. You are in the majority. When we start shifting up the rules, shifting up who we are, when we start speaking more truth, more of our real wants and needs, we're going to get hit with judgment, labels, all sorts of words. And first of all, a lot of compassion that you're having the courage to stretch, to step out of your comfort zone, to ask for what's true. Second piece, own. My asking for this is not being impossible to please, right? That is not so. So we do that big turnaround there. We go to our partner, whoever is accusing us of these things, and we tell our truth. For me, this is important. I really appreciate not being labeled or judged for what is my truth. This is important. And you don't have to agree with it. I just need you to hear it without labeling it, right? So we do that part. And again, we welcome that within ourselves, every right to want that. not okay that it's being judged and criticized and labeled. We're working with all the pillars in that way, right? I want this. I'm allowed to want something. I'm shifting up the relationship just right there. I'm actually being bold enough to say what I want without apologizing for it. That's a really big thing for a woman to do. Just say what I want. They can't know it without our saying it. We can't, they don't read it. Nobody reads our minds. We're responsible for saying it kindly and respectfully. We're not responsible for how they experience it, but we're responsible for saying it, right? And I am not okay with being judged for what I want. That's the old system.
Okay, so Nancy, there are just hundreds of comments of what a wonderful presentation this was in the comments in the chat, and people thanking you very much for the information. I think if you wouldn't mind, there's been a few comments about your book. So could you tell us a little bit about your book coming out?
Sure. So the new book is coming out called The Emotionally Exhausted Woman. And it is a talk about a much bigger conversation about what we've been talking about. It comes out November 1st, and it's available everywhere. And it goes deeper into our conditioning and deeper into the real cures for what we're talking about. So, and I am always open to questions through my website, nancycollier.com, or there are many ways to reach me, but to answer more questions and your particular concerns.
Great. There's so many comments coming in. Thank you. I needed this. Thank you for giving me the courage to continue to move forward, to ask for what I need. It's just been wonderful, Nancy. So I think that's it. That's all the time we have today. So we appreciate very much that you were able to join us, and hopefully we'll have some time again in the future.